Good afternoon, cosmic comic travelers. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Sunday chat. Thank you very much for joining us and watching in the future. I have two extremely special guests with me this week. I'm very, very glad to see you both. We'll start on my left. Anshuman, for the love of comics, hello, how are you?
I'm doing great. It's great to be back. It seems it's been ages. I think it's been
Yeah,
almost a year, if not more, since I was
gotta be.
last on.
Yeah. And it's like what, 4 in the morning there for you? 3 in the morning?
No, not yet. It's just 11:30, so
Perfect.
plenty of wind left. Yes.
Right. Hello, Rasa. Rasa watching in the chat.
Hey.
I think Rasa has come down with a little bit of illness. I don't think
Mm,
made it to the Comic Smart, which I'm disappointed about. I know that
that's
she's
awful.
probably disappointed too, but it's a bummer. Hello, Larasa. And then down below us is Mr. Comic Book Manifesto himself, Colin. How are
Hi,
you?
gentlemen. I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks. Thanks for joining us.
Of course. Yeah. Happy to be here.
So why don't we just start right into what we were just talking about before we went live? So, Colin, tell us all the story because I get it a lot. I've had it a couple times. I'm sure you get it a million times as well too. What happened to the Loading the Cannon YouTube channel, rather?
Um, well, I'm always hesitant to invoke the wrath of
Right.
Google again. But basically, I was never given a specific reason or a specific offense, but they decided that my channel had violated community standards. I had shown some erotic comics on. I had a batch of 90s material, and a bunch of Eros comics were in that. And I'm just assuming that was the reason because it came right after. And that video got tons of views for
Yeah.
me. Usually I tapped out at a few hundred, and that had surpassed 1,000 within a
Oh
couple
wow.
days, and which I thought was very strange. And then afterwards realized it probably was bad that happened because it probably was seen by someone who didn't care for that,
Mhm.
or it was just seen by the AI scanning over everything. And yeah, so they wiped me out. I
Hold it.
Wow.
appealed. They told me go to hell, and um, that was it. So,
Yeah, I mean,
so
I
I,
think
I
the
sort of
thing that
I relaunched. Like I said, that's a gray area, so I don't want to provoke any outrage or whatever. But
yeah,
yeah, so guess I'm gonna try to keep it fairly clean. And
right.
anytime I have any video that I think might have anything in there, I'm marking it as 18 and over.
Yeah.
I used to do everything through my phone, and when you do that, the phone doesn't give you that option. It only says, "Is this for kids or not?"
Hmm.
Right.
Um, so I think now I'm doing everything on a PC, and kind of trying to just follow the letter of the law. And
Yeah.
so hopefully I can just fly under the radar, and the people that watched me before can find me again. I wasn't. It was a it was a blow. Just it really kind of sucked the wind out of my sails when it happened. Not because I was losing all the subscribers and that, it's not like I was doing this to make a living, but
Right.
just the quality of the people who are watching and commenting, and then you think those people might not find me again anytime soon, or
Hmm.
and there were quite a few things I was proud of. I had done several live streams, including with you, Terrence. You're my first one,
Hmm.
and I had Eric Reynolds from Fantagraphics on,
Yeah.
and so I was sad to lose those. And I had gone through that whole Comics Journal's top 100 of the century,
That's
and
right.
done 10 videos on that I really was proud of. And so, a couple of years from now will be the 25th anniversary of that list. So maybe I'll just recreate the wheel and have something a little more enlightened to say, hopefully.
Yeah.
But anyway, I
Wow.
tried to, after a day or two of sulking, I said, well, back on the saddle, and just
Right.
try to look at it as a learning opportunity, and hopefully I can make better videos the next time around.
Right.
So we'll see. Right
I
now
think.
I'm still easing back into it. It's been a month, so I'm
Yeah,
just
for
sort of
sure.
kicking the dust off, or the
anytime you want to talk smutty comics, you just come on over here. We'll hunker down in the basement here, and
I've acquired quite a few
Terrence.
If you
what's that? Sorry, say that again.
I've acquired quite a few since then that I have not been able to show. So.
Well, there you go. Come on over. I mean, one of the things that I do with my channel is I mark everything as adult content. None of my stuff is for kids. I always make sure I downloaded the studio app on my phone. And then as soon as a live stream has finished, as soon as I hit end and leave the room, I go right to that app and mark it right away as not for children, because I don't want to take any chances that mine gets anywhere even close to families and whoever else is surfing the net, right? And I think my whole channel is marked as adults as well too. But I did that so long ago just to, again, make sure that there's no preconceptions of anything I'm about to show you is for your children, unless you want to bring your children around. And, but so it was a bummer to see you go. I think the thing that surprised me the most was just the automatic takedown. Not even like a warning, not even like a, hey, take this video down. It was just boom, you're gone. That's kind of a surprise.
Well, when I did some Googling to kind of find out, exactly, AFPC, hello. When I did some Googling, I found out this happens a lot. And
really?
It happens to some people who haven't done anything. Like at least mine, I could say, oh, well, I did have nudity and sexual content. So I got there. I understood what they were saying. It wasn't like I mostly was just felt lost because I had the appeal wasn't really an appeal. I wrote, 1,000 words or whatever, and they just sort of disregarded it within a few hours and said no, So, but there are people who are able to get their channels back. But even those people have a very hard time doing it, even when they have not violated any community standards. Just they ran afoul of something, somebody complained, and I think YouTube or Google, they just see it as easier to cut their law. I mean, if I was Cartoonist Kayfabe and had 50,000 subscribers or whatever, that's probably a different conversation because it's monetized. But for guys, who are making videos for a few hundred people at most, it's not, so.
Well, and that's what I always put off is why I get left alone. Cause I mean, on average, it's around 100, 140 viewers if I'm lucky at the top end. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's perfect to kind of stay in the corner there. You touched on Eric Reynolds. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about what you've been doing recently? He prompts.
I think I told you before, it's not that exciting, but
so you say.
So I say, yeah. I've done a few I guess you call them shifts, though I'm not working. I'm somewhere between a volunteer and an intern. Like I'm not official. I just volunteered my time. But I'm going into Fantagraphics a couple times a week, and we're trying to catalog their library downstairs.
Amazing.
So one of the editors there is the guy who's actually sort of doing the thinking. I'm just doing data entry and helping. And so all I've done so far is foreign editions. Trying to determine where some of these things come from, because obviously if you have something in Korean, they have no reason to print anything in English. So or Russian, or, you're just sort of looking for any sort of data on this thing to put it into the spreadsheet. But yeah, so it's been pretty just rote work. But hopefully within 2 or 3 sessions, we'll get to the main library. And I haven't even had a chance really to wander around that yet. Just a couple times I've snuck glances. I found a couple books I didn't even know existed. So I'm pretty excited to get into the meat and see what is lurking in there that's been hiding for 30, 40 years. Because that's just the graphic novel area, because they have a whole area of comics and they have a whole area of magazines.
Wow.
Which all look very untouched. And the comic area is Gary Groth and Kim Thompson's personal collections from when they were young. So it's full of just probably Silver Age, Bronze Age, Undergrounds that haven't been looked at, except to pull them out and scan them for an article and put them back. Mm-hmm. So that's the exciting stuff. I'm looking forward to seeing the things that have been lost to time in there. And hopefully they get something out of it, that they can get some things organized and, have things that are searchable. because obviously they want to do imagery for an article. They go looking and it's, where the hell do we find this thing? It's pretty tough.
Which stack is it in? Yeah.
Yeah.
So these foreign editions, are they things that are these books that people send them? Are they stuff that, is it a mix of people that are buying stuff and just adding it to the stack? Or
no, it's when they license what they've done to another country. So so like if something was already made in France and Fantagraphics makes it, that is not included. That would be somewhere else. But if they let someone in France use their files to make a book, they're supposed to send them copies that they can send to the creator and that they can then put in their own library. And I get the feeling this wasn't a priority for them for a very long time. But now, I mean, obviously they're trying to run a small company and there's a lot going on and just turnover of people. But now they just want to kind of keep better records as far as that stuff goes and be able to find these things. So the foreign editions are just going to get boxed up and put probably in a warehouse, but at least they'll be able to say, hey, box 8 has all of the Hernandez brothers stuff from, around the world, and they can go find it if they need to. And then hopefully they'll be able to cross-reference and find stuff they're missing, if they need to track stuff down. But some of these translations, the earliest one I've seen is from 1983, which was Gil Kane's Savage. His name is Savage, that they licensed to, I think, to France. So that's pretty old, but they're from, Poland and Slovenia and they're all over the place. So it's pretty amazing how far and wide some of these get. And obviously Klaus and the Hernandez brothers are the ones who have the widest reach, but it's been pretty cool to see where stuff ends up. I just did Barry Windsor Smith Monsters, and those were in 10 different languages. So
wow.
Yeah.
That's kind of amazing. That's very, very cool. You'll have to give us some updates when you hit some of the other libraries, especially the PC library, like the personal collection library. I think would be kind of amazing to see their history.
I think he should do a secret. I think he should do a secret live stream from within the offices. Right? Just
when I feel a little more comfortable, maybe I'll broach that subject. Yeah,
right. So. I'll be there. Make sure that you let us know, and we'll be like a virtual tour of Fantagraphics.
Yeah. If you could film it with a 360 camera so we can just VR helmet the experience and wander around ourselves, that would be great.
Well, one thing that I know Terrence will appreciate is the area where all of the foreign editions have been kept was the former Eros office. So it's just a little nook down there, but that is where they would have one or two guys just churning out all those comics. Came from that one little 5x8 space. So
smelled a little funny, smelled like sweat and desperation.
Yeah. So
Donald Rex, hello. Hello everybody, by the way. AFPC, Donald Rex, Rick Ray, Rasa's here, of course, we said already. Donald was saying when I worked for Groth, he had file cabinets full of amazing signed comic books and zines. That's
he
incredible.
He has a very large office and tons of filing cabinets, so I'm sure they're full of treasures. So
yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
So have you met the man himself?
I met him to say hello.
Nice, perfect.
I was introduced to him. We said hello, and that's about it. So I didn't want to sound stupid, so I kept my mouth shut.
Right.
But he did. At first, he seemed skeptical of who's this guy, but then he was very. I think they're all very excited about the prospect of this stuff getting organized. So his mood brightened when he heard that was underway. So
right, you're here to do the job that nobody else wanted to do.
Yeah.
Hello, Gore Vidal. Welcome.
Hey.
Yeah,
that's amazing, Colin. That's really, really cool. And then Donald Rex, when you're on next weekend, you'll have to tell us some stories there.
I've been emailing.
Yeah,
I emailed with Donald just recently. Like I check my email maybe a couple of times a week at this point. So he'll probably come on next weekend if I can put together a sentence, and then he'll have some more stories for us. And now this gives me something else to grill him about his time working with Groth at Fantagraphics. So why don't we jump into it? Anshuman, did you want to start us off with what kind of things have you been reading recently? Did you have something specific or?
Well, honestly, I was just I was happy to be invited, so I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want you to say, "All right, if you haven't read any comics, you're not allowed on the show." So I actually haven't read anything. I thought I'd just come by and say hi and things like that. But but I've just been working on videos as I was talking before this live stream got started. I made this New Year resolution that I'm going to be more regular with my videos, and I'll just be more disciplined and things like that. So that because they take so much time, it really eats into everything else. But I thought of a couple of different things, and interestingly, speaking about Fantagraphics, I made a video on Thomas Ott books from Fantagraphics, and I was trying to, think about what else, and I remembered that there's a 00 issue that he did the cover for.
Oh, nice.
Right.
This is number 25, and I'd completely, because I bought 00 way back in the day when I was discovering Richard Sala and things like that. But yeah, this is the first story, is the hook, is a Thomas Ott story. So when I was thinking about which anthologies he'd been published in before Fantagraphics started, I was thinking maybe it was the second volume of Raw, but yeah, one issue over here. So I just picked this out. Let me see if this other camera thing works. Does that work? Oh, okay.
It sure does. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So I mean, I haven't looked at this in ages, so I thought that I might as well pull this out and we can take a look at it together. Silent comic from Thomas Ott. But yeah, I'd completely forgotten about it, and in fact now I'm trying to remember if this is actually collected in the one collection that I have, and I don't think so. So there's an extra story for me that I wasn't even aware of.
It's beautiful. Wow.
And I think it's just these 4 pages,
right?
And that's
it's just incredible
that's
looking
the hook.
stuff.
It's just someone collecting hats. Well, the Grim Reaper collecting hats. Yeah,
beautiful.
And then there's the other stuff. There were a lot of regulars in 00, but you two probably know way more than I do about this time. It's always me trying to catch up and put myself in the shoes of people going into independent comic book stores in the US and picking these issues up. I mean, I'm coming in years later trying to find where was this person first published and what what did they have before the collected editions or the the bound volumes came out. But I don't know, is this something, were you reading or getting these comics when they were coming out? I had a question.
I know 00, but I wasn't getting it when it was coming out. I think I have maybe an issue or two, but it's not an anthology. I'm super familiar with. Colin, are you up on 00?
Yeah, I have a complete run of 00, but I did it after the fact. I wasn't reading it. I may have picked up an issue at the time, but it flew under my radar for sure. That might have just been a period where I didn't have access to a good comic shop, that would carry wide ranging material like that. So yeah, sometime in the early 2000s, I was able to grab all of them. I think like everything else, they've kind of gone up in value now to make them harder to get. But and the print runs couldn't have been very big, obviously.
Right.
But back then I could find them for cover price or less. I mean, nobody wanted them, So, but yeah, he's right. It's full of amazing cartoonists. Just and it's really the defining. Yeah, here's Rick Ray saying it's kind of the defining anthology of its time. But I think by that point, the days of anthologies had kind of gone away. I mean, they have to be in a book now, like Kramer's or Got, for people to take notice. So,
was it mid to late 90s? Is that?
I want to say yes, and then maybe even into the early 2000s. I don't know. Okay. It only went an issue or two after the one he showed.
Right.
Right. This is one of the later ones. I think 27 was the last one or something like that. Let me see if I can.
Yeah.
Does it have a year? Is almost.
Oh, there you go.
Does it say? Is that focusing?
A little bit, yeah.
I've got this manual focus. Hold on.
Yeah. Yeah,
There
I
we go.
mean
Oh, there you
that
go.
that time
98,
period,
99.
1999. Yeah, that time
Yeah.
period, I wasn't really hitting comic shops as much. And then we lived in when we lived in Ontario. I think it was 98 that we moved to Ontario till like 2003 or something like that. The couple of shops that were there, while they had some really good stuff, the alternative comic section in Kitchener-Waterloo was really like just non-existent. In the 90s here in Winnipeg, going to those shops, there was so much of that Fantagraphics specifically, like so many of these kind of independent books that it was very, very easy to to just grab whatever and just get exposed to all of this great stuff. Again, like I hate to keep saying it, it's just I consider myself very lucky to be growing up in a very comic book centric town, with a lot of really fantastic shops. But at that period of time, I was out of comics for quite a while. And then coming back in, I just didn't have access in the town I was living in. In Toronto, I'm sure going to the shops there, I'm sure would have been a different story, but it's not something that I was doing very much other than to go to school and come home, right? So,
Sure.
But yeah, that's one to keep an eye out for sure.
Yeah, I would recommend any issue if you find, grab it. I mean, they're just full of great stuff. Chuckling What's It by Richard Sala ran through 00.
Yeah.
And granted, you can get that in the book now, but that just says this. That was just running through 00, and that's a masterpiece, in my opinion. So it's full of great stuff. And Rick Ray pointed out there was an Al Columbia story in there that people lost their minds over at the time. So but that anthology was Kim Thompson's baby, and so probably ran longer than it financially made sense to. But I'm glad.
Yeah. Rick Ray, that's amazing. Went to school in the Kitchener-Waterloo area, and yes, comic shops were sparse back when I went to school. Yes, and of course, Texas. I can't imagine. Marvel, DC centric.
Yeah.
Stars and Stripes forever, everybody. Colin, do you have anything for us to discuss? What have you been reading?
Sure. I feel Angshuman's pain because the last time I came on with you, I hadn't read anything. And so I had to just talk about some stuff I bought. So I actually have read a few things. I guess while I'm here and we're making everybody puke talking about Fantagraphics so much, I'll hold up a new book by them. Earl Grey actually had this book on one of his recent videos, though he had the original language. And this is Spa by Eric Svetoft. I'm hoping that's how you pronounce it. And this, I don't think it's hit shops in North America yet. I got this last week at the Fantagraphics store. And so I'll just show off. The art is kind of, I don't know. I don't want to insult it. Kind of bland, but it does have moments where it gets pretty creepy. And as that creepiness sort of pervades, the whole thing takes place in this sort of like wellness spa, in the mountains. And there's clearly something there that's not right. And I don't even know how I really feel about the book, to be honest.
Wow.
As it went further along, I definitely enjoyed it a bit more than I was enjoying it in the beginning. It has a very flat style on it in its tone. Like I said, see, you have these very simple characters, and then the backgrounds start to get, more and more sort of degraded and baroque. And in the back, or on the back cover, I think it compares it to Junji Ito.
Right.
That sort of feeling of disquiet horror, So I would not give it a full-throated endorsement at all. And I'm also not a horror guy in general. I don't watch horror movies. Wow. I will read horror comics or books, but it's just not a genre I'm particularly interested in. But anyway, he definitely has something to say. It might just be a satire of the wellness industry and late era capitalism, so your mileage may vary is kind of what I would say about it.
Right.
So like I said, for as kind of unimpressive as the art is in the beginning, there are some very stylistic flourishes later. One problem I had is a lot of characters look the same. And so that gets a little frustrating when you're trying to figure out what the hell's going on, especially when there's not really much going on,
Right.
So anyway, like I said, I wouldn't give it a full-throated endorsement, but I'd say if it looks interesting, it'd probably be worth checking out. To me, this is like the perfect example of a library read, something that's worth getting and checking out. But I don't know that I would revisit it. So,
right.
But who the hell knows? I thought that about plenty of other books and comics over the years, and then 10 years later, now they're my favorite person, and I have to go reread everything and find everything. So,
right.
I try to keep an open mind that way and realize that at this point in my life, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't my favorite thing I read that day. So
yeah. Yeah, no, it caught my. I'm with Gore. It caught my attention. It looks very cool. I kind of dig the art there. It almost has this yokai kind of monsters mythos to it.
Sure.
Rick Ray.
Yeah.
And then Rickard Westman. Is a fellow Swede. Haven't read his stuff yet though.
Yeah, this is the first I'd ever heard of him. And I saw this in the previous catalog, and that was the first I'd ever heard of it. And then, like I said, I saw Earl Grey had it on one of his videos, and I went, "Oh, that's that book that's coming out." But I didn't pay too close attention to it because I knew it was something I wanted to read. So, like I said, I don't regret getting it at all. It's a very nice book, but yeah,
cool, very cool. That's very cool.
I'm just curious if you don't like you mentioned that there have been books that you really didn't like and then became something almost part of your favorites. Do you have an example of that or something recent?
I have two big ones actually, and one is one I know you're a big fan of, and that's Richard Sala. When I first read his work, I thought, this is fine. And I remembered him from the old MTV show, Liquid Television. I remembered his cartoon. And so I thought, this is okay, But then a few years later, I sort of dove back into it. And he's one of my favorite cartoonists. I'm not someone who's bothered by, people who pass away that I've never met or anything. But I will say when he passed away, it hit me kind of hard. I was just very surprised. I was really glad that Fantagraphics put out that book. I can't remember what the name of it is now, but it has like 4 different stories, and I thought it was a great capstone to his career.
Poison Flowers and Pandemonium.
That's it. Yeah. So I was so grateful that we got that, and then we have a new edition of the Chuckling What's It just came out, and that's a beautiful edition. And it had been printed a couple times before, so it wasn't like you couldn't get a hold of it. But I'm glad they're sticking with his work and trying to keep the word out about him. I think he was a hell of a cartoonist. And one of the other ones was Jim Woodring, actually. I loved Woodring's autobiographical stuff, the first stuff he had done, that book of Jim and everything. And when I first saw Frank, I said, okay, I don't know. It just didn't really resonate with me at all. And then a few years later, I tried it again, and that it really clicked for me. And I've greatly enjoyed all of his books since. Except for the Gonads book with all the words. I thought that was a real misstep on his part.
Right.
But I did have someone commented on an old video of mine telling me that I needed to read that high. and it would make more sense. I said, okay, you know, but yeah, otherwise I've enjoyed everything by Woodring. I thought his latest book, where he, you know, wove in 3 former books with 100 new pages. What is that? One fine spring day.
Beautiful spring day, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that was the best book of his career. And so I'm fully on board the Woodring train.
Right.
That's have you guys read Oliver Schrowen?
No, it's not a name I recognize. No.
That I agree with Rick Ray. Full-throated enthusiasm, 100%. One of the best cartoonists in the world. So if you have a chance to get something by him, grab it. Everything by him's good, but he's amazing.
Right. It's funny when you talk about. It's funny when you talk about things just kind of finally clicking. Anshuman, was there something? Or do you have something in mind? Bringing up this topic. Is there something in mind for you that kind of took you a little while and then it clicked at some point? Was there an artist or a writer or?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think Gore Vidal mentioned Charles Burns and Black Hole. It's not so much with Black Hole, but Black Hole changed my mind about Charles Burns. So I'd read like Big Baby and, you know, a lot of the rather phantasmagoric, absurd kind of things. And I was just like, there's obviously something here because it gets under my skin, but it's not appealing to me. It's not engaging me in any other way. And, you know, so I appreciated it. But Black Hole for me was kind of like oh, this is what you can do with the style, and this is what you can do with that. You know, it seemed like a maturation in a way that and there's nothing, and there are a lot of people who don't like Black Hole and they think his other stuff is much better, you know, but to me it was kind of like, I don't know, if you're watching Almodovar, you know, and it's great, and then you watch All About My Mother, and then you're just like, oh, okay, I didn't know, you know, that you were going to do this or something like that. So it was that kind of thing for me, where I changed my mind about Charles Burns because of that. And then I think when I went back to the X'd Out trilogy, I liked it a little bit more than I had, by the time the X'd Out trilogy ended, I enjoyed it more than when I read the first book. And I think Black Hole had a lot to do with getting. So I think that's a good example for me as well. Yeah, but I'm always curious about that because there have been people who have enjoyed and then not enjoyed, but there seem to be fewer where the reverse is the case. Usually people I've kind of liked them for a while. Sometimes I grow out of things, but it's rarer, I think, to grow into things. So that's why it's great to see these comments about other people talking about that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what kind of sparks it. It's funny how that happens here. Curious, Colin, and to the panel, moving in the opposite direction, are there works that you had a lot of affection for that over time have lost their luster, or you've just grown to dislike? That's an interesting. Anybody want to tackle that one?
I'll go. That is a loaded question. And it's one I'm very interested in because I had thought about making my own list of best comics, something I haven't tried to do in almost 20 years. And now we're drowning in them. There's so much good material that it's almost an impossible task to do. But I have had where I've reread things I thought very highly of, and I didn't dislike them, but I was not as blown away by them as I was when I was younger. And the number one example that I can think of off the top of my head is Goodbye Chunky Rice by Craig Thompson.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you guys have read that. It's the book he did before Blankets.
Yeah.
Blankets was one of the great disappointments to me in my comics reading life because I loved Goodbye Chunky Rice so much. And when I reread it, I thought, that was a pretty good book, but it was not as poetic and resonant as I thought it was when I read it at 22 or whatever, however old I was at the time. And then meanwhile, something like Bone, I have reread several times and I like it more each time. It climbs the list for me. And I, bore the shit out of anybody I see and I'll talk to you about Bone. You need to read Bone, and it's weirdly a hard sell to adults, even though that was the original intended audience, of course. But so yeah, I can go either way. But yeah, AFPC asks a really good question, and I do wonder if I go back and reread a lot of my old favorites from when I was a teenager into my early 20s, how far down the list will they have fallen?
Right.
So,
Yeah. Anshuman, do you have something that you comes to
Yeah,
your
I've got
mind?
all the usual suspects, I'm afraid, because
Right.
it's for me it's about reading something when you were young, not having experienced anything like that, and then coming back to it later. And I think, yes, it's one thing that you're older and then you read all the other stuff. So sometimes I think I'm being a little unfair because the things that I am now evaluating as superior are built on the backs of these other things. So, I can appreciate something. But yeah, for me, when I was young, I think I read The Killing Joke when I was 13, and I was just, I don't know what this is. This is amazing. This is astonishing. What is this Batman? What is this story? What is this Joker, etc.? I mean, it was just a mind blowing, it was a seismic experience for me. And I think every time I've revisited it, it's become lesser.
Right.
And to the point where I don't really enjoy it. I mean, there are a couple of things in it that are still, and I think the reputation of it, becoming when I read it, I had no idea who Alan Moore was or anything. I had no idea. I thought I was just going to read another Batman comic, which is why I think that happened. So I think from my childhood to my, this thing, and I've enjoyed a lot of Alan Moore, and there are a lot of Alan Moore books on my top comics of all time, but The Killing Joke wouldn't make it. And I think when I got back into reading comics and I started reading a lot of Vertigo comics, and that was sort of the bridge, I think at that point of time, I really enjoyed, like Transmetropolitan and Preacher and 100 Bullets. And 100 Bullets is one of those where I tried to go back to it. And Preacher, Transmetropolitan holds up for me.
Right.
Preacher, is also, it's fine. I think somewhere after a certain volume in the trade paperbacks, I get a little exhausted, but it's really a great ride. But 100 Bullets, particularly because of the writing, I think it just, like, what sounded cool and noir at a particular point of time just doesn't
100%.
doesn't work for me anymore. Yeah.
Right.
What about you?
I haven't. 100 Bullets is one that I've been thinking of revisiting because, again, when I was first reading it, I was really enjoying it. But hearing that makes me think that, you know what, maybe I'll just kind of keep putting that off. And maybe
it's better in your memory, I would say.
Yeah.
If you have a nice little spot for it on your memory shelf, I would advise you to keep it there. Yeah.
I mean,
I have to ask, Anshuman, with The Killing Joke, is it the content that bothers you, or is it the execution that bothers you?
It's the execution. It seems like not enough of a story, and at the same time, it wants to. And I think I've somebody online explained to me why I was completely wrong about the ending. And I'm willing to accept that. What they're saying. And I don't really get into this, does he kill the Joker? Does he not kill the Joker?
Yeah.
Is it an Elseworld story? I don't think those are the kind of things. I don't think the last scene ever makes anything for me. I think the last scene often breaks something for me. But it can't be just because of what that means. The whole thing's got to stand up to it. And this whole, that whole concept of, wanting to crack and then somebody being resilient and all of that stuff, it just didn't seem like there was enough meat on the bones, and it seemed kind of slipshod and not elegant in what it was trying to do. And I think that Alan Moore is very good at being provocative and being excessive, and there are other comics of his that I'm okay with, but I think he does a better job of the storytelling than I don't know. I mean, I don't think that's right. It's just funny that maybe it was because it was so high up as a comic experience for me when I was young. I think it's hard for anything to live up to that sort of, unless I was reading it constantly, but I had a gap. And I came back and read it 6 years after I'd first read it. And I was like, it's not interesting anymore.
I think it's a good comic, but it's amazing to me how highly it's put up. And I think if it wasn't Batman, if it was just some other character, it wouldn't be remembered really, other than Brian Boland's amazing art. And like, I'm an Alan Moore guy, I think Terrence knows that. I'm a huge Alan Moore guy. It's a pretty minor Moore work, and he disowned it, a long before he disowned all the other stuff. He pretty much said that it had fantastic art by Boland, but the writing wasn't good enough to justify Boland's art. And he said that back in the early 90s, and I always thought, I think it's a little better than he thinks it is, but I can definitely see why he says it. Now that I'm older, I can definitely see why he said that at the time. And I do wonder, Boland just recently made a comment that when Moore was writing it, he kind of wanted to stop writing it.
Yeah.
Because he was already falling out with DC, but he kind of stuck with it for Boland. And I do wonder if he would have done all that stuff with Barbara Gordon. I wonder if he would have gone quite as far if he wasn't as upset with DC as he was at the time.
Yeah.
I wonder if that was his way of lashing out a bit. But
yeah, I was going to say the same
he's not
thing.
going to talk about it. So
he talks about that because the kayfabe guys have done a couple of videos with him, and that's something he says in their first conversation there, that he remembers getting a call from Alan Moore and them talking. He's like, now I look back on it and I really feel like he was calling me to tell me that I don't want to do this anymore. But to his credit, he finished it up and kind of went with it, because I got the impression from that conversation that it was more a Boland driven story. It was more him kind of at the helm of pushing to get this story going and stuff. They also go page by page through it, and he talks about all the stuff he doesn't like about the coloring and things and his recoloring. It's a fascinating conversation, as when they get these artists who want to talk about their work, it's fascinating to hear what they have to say about it, especially going page by page and breaking down what he liked and what he didn't like. But
sure.
I'm missing so many comments. I apologize, everybody. I'm missing a lot of comments here, but I'll catch up at some point. The only one that stands out for me is one that I've talked about before, that I caught a bit of flack for. The Velvet Glove just didn't live up to my memory of it. I absolutely loved it when I was a teenager, I guess, whatever age I was when it was coming out. I guess I was 19 or 20 at that point. I loved it coming there. And I think, like I've spoken about before, I think something about the reading it all at once versus spacing it out, kind of having an issue, a couple months later, getting another issue, getting another chunk of a story, I think worked a lot more. Revisiting it this last time, it really just fell flat, and I found it really kind of challenging to go through the book. And there was talk in the comments too about some of the Vertigo stuff. And I think for me, because Vertigo was such a big thing, some of that stuff, it's in that same boat as 100 Bullets. I don't think I'll ever revisit it, just for fear of like, it just had left such a good impression on me that I kind of don't want to revisit that part of my youth and read these books and go, what the fuck was I thinking back then? What the hell was going on? So, but it is interesting how things kind of shift and change for art, especially. One of the things, because you were here, Colin, I finished, I read a few issues of Post Brothers, and I know that you're a Matt Howarth guy as well too. Yeah. And his art is something that's really, it's absolutely shines for me in this Post Brothers. I think, like, out of the very limited Matt Howarth stuff that I've read, this is right at the top for me as far as like his art style goes. The world is really intriguing, but like it's amazing how the shift of I would remember seeing some of his art in the past and it just kind of falling flat for me. But now there's something about it and the details and everything he puts in the colors and on the covers, but all of the details within the book are just, I don't know, man, they work so much more for me now than they ever had, where I never really even gave this stuff a second look. But stuff like this really holds so much more appeal to me these days. Yeah. The world and the story building and stuff is really fantastic as well. It has this kind of anarchistic kind of feel to it. Where anything could happen, anything will happen. There's this violence that's going on and these characters jumping from kind of dimension to dimension or reality to reality. But just really amazing, that mix of like these kind of detailed backgrounds and these more simplistic kind of character designs in the foreground. from what I don't know if this is the case with some of this early Post Brothers stuff. Did this originally appeal in heavy metal, Colin?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I know AFPC is a Howarth enthusiast. He might have an answer.
Right.
I think he might have appeared in heavy metal, but I don't think the Post Brothers stuff did.
Right.
I agree with you though. I think I like Matt Howarth a lot, but he is one of those guys he's so into this music. He includes all the the people from the music makers in his comics,
Mm-hmm.
and it does make it a little impenetrable to try to figure out what the hell's going on. It really feels like a guy drawing a comic for his friends in high school, but it just happened to be professionally produced, and it's actually, I can't believe it lasted 60 issues or something. It's astounding to me that happened. So I don't know. He's a guy I'm fascinated with. I've read a good chunk, but not everything by any means. And I kind of like him when he's contained into little mini series or books where it's just a little more accessible,
Totally.
not to bring it down, but make it a little bit more where I can get a foothold in what you're talking about, what's going on, because I just, I had no frame of reference for any of these musicians he was talking about at the time. So I don't know.
It really, and even with the miniseries and stuff, they just all feed into this one overarching kind of world that he's created. Like he's really just created his own universe that even all the offshoots, even the Savage Henry stories or the Uber dubs or whatever little offshoot it's going to be, still has this link back to his original kind of universe. True. It's incredible to me that this one guy has just, first of all, done a whole bunch of work for so many years and kind of continues to do stuff, but that it's kind of all, it's all his, and it's all something that he just continues to explore and find some areas to, some little niches and nooks and crannies to kind of place some stories in. Really impressive. He feels like a guy that you could read for most of the rest of your life and still kind of always have something new to kind of attach yourself to. The only thing I would say is about some of the newer stuff, even the stuff online that he has, the kind of sparseness does detract from it a little more. This stuff really works for me because of that nice blend of art in the panels and things, where sometimes some of the later stuff, there's such a lack of things going on that it doesn't lend itself to something like that's really, really visually interesting. But who knows? Ask me again in 2 years and maybe it'll be the highest of art, right? Like, it's just weird how all that stuff transitions for you as you get older and digging into these books and seeing so much art come across your desk, right? So we were talking Howarth there, AFPC, yes, and you are the like we go to Colin for Fantagraphic stuff, so you were going to go to Howarth stuff.
Yeah. I just want to say real quick, 1 second, to go back to Velvet Glove. I think you and I messaged at the time when you read it. And I don't want to upset AFPC here, who's going to the mat for it. But I agree with you. I didn't enjoy it when I first read it, and I still hold that opinion. Saying I didn't enjoy it's probably too extreme, but I just think for me, it's he goes upward, in my opinion. So Angshuman, how do you feel about that? Do you have feelings on Clouds in terms of what your favorite work is, or?
My favorite work is Mr. Wonderful. I mean, I for some reason maybe it's the most optimistic or the most, I mean, I like Wilson as well, and I didn't think I would like Wilson, but by the time I ended it, I found the character really endearing. And I think sometimes what happens with a lot of these like really awesome creators is sometimes their characters aren't, I mean, purposefully they're not likable, and you're supposed to like have some empathy, at least, if not like them or be fond, and their ugliness is part of that. But I don't know, there's something about I think Patience was very good as well. I mean, I'm always going to have a soft spot for Ghost World, but it's like when I read 8 Ball, I thought that was an interesting experience of having that sort of magazine, because you could have so many different things crammed in there, and they were so different from each other, and including the sort of one-page things and things like that. So I got a better sense of Dan Clowes from 8 Ball, which made me not think about those kind of stories. But as a volume, I was quite I don't know. I mean, I think most of the time when I tell people that it's Mr. Wonderful, they're just like, that's an odd one to pick, and I'm just
Yeah,
like,
that's
but
out of left
I don't know.
field.
Yeah, but it's I for some reason I think I thought about because Ghost World, I think like for many people that was the first thing I read of his, and probably because there was a movie out and there was a
Sure.
trade paperback for that and things like that. But I liked Ghost World quite a lot, even though some of my friends were like, "Oh, this is this hipster stuff," and they were trying to tell me about hipsters, and I didn't get any of it. I didn't get that
Right.
context, and I thought it was just, I thought it was a pretty good story, and I liked the way it ended. I thought it was a very touching end. So you can again, you can sort of like, if you got that emotion in you. So I think, in short, I like the ones that are more emotional. And the ones that are more distant and a little colder, purposefully so, are the ones that leave me a little colder, I guess, if that
Right.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah,
What
for
about
sure. And I
you?
think like 8 Ball at the time that it was coming out again, like, don't want to go hours and hours on Dan Clowes, but I think at
Sorry.
the day of like 8 Ball coming out, like when that stuff came out, it was just really incredible to see that stuff again. Like buying issue number 1 in the shop when I saw it, and because I was buying all this other shit as well too. Like it was really just mind blowing that these kind of creators had these voices that were just very unique, and it was such a thrill to find this stuff. I find now that in looking back on some of the things, because I agree with you about that kind of the I hate the word, but the hipster kind of stuff, and the coldness and everything. Some of that self-deprecating and, hey, let's just make fun of everybody. I've been watching every once in a while. I don't watch all of them, but Living the Line has been going issue by issue of 8 Ball. I've only watched a few, and he says I don't watch many of them because I pretty much agree with him. I don't feel the need to revisit it. But a lot of the things he says I would agree with. There's just this real sense, and that was a very much a time specific thing. That kind of like, hey, let's just look at everybody and make fun of everybody and just shit on everybody, that just gets really tired after a while. Where some of his other stuff, I remember reading Patience, Four Color Ryan Carey had talked about it, and I was blown away by it. It was almost like a reintroduction to him in some degree. Like, yes, there's still touches of that kind of old voice in there, but it's really moved past it, where some of that early stuff is difficult to kind of read because of that attitude, and because how that can kind of read to me now. Yeah. Living the Line has been pretty lukewarm on Maple. Yeah, he really has. He's, yeah. Yeah, and I mean all of this other stuff, like I agree with all of that stuff. And again, like at the time, and, I love surrealism. It's just, I feel that there's something to be said for having like a surrealist, or having some sort of like, there's surrealism, and then there's stuff that reads like I'm just kind of do automatic writing, like a Burroughs type of automatic. We're just gonna, whatever words come into my head, I'm just gonna put them on the paper, and we'll sort it out afterwards. There's that level of that happens in Velvet Glove, that it just kind of, it was a good landscape, but it just kind of didn't have anything else going for it. On this reread, again, at the time, blown away by it, because again, this idea that this is a comic that somebody's writing and people are buying it, this is fucking incredible. Being a guy who was discovering people like David Lynch at the time and things like that. It kind of put it in a little bit more of a context outside of all the superhero stuff that was happening at the time too, right? That we were absolutely inundated with. To have this voice that's saying something like that was really like a beacon, in a sea of capes. Yeah. Gorvidal, I've yet to read a Clowes book.
That's
Wow.
why I did a double take while you were talking. I read his comment. I could not believe that.
Right.
So very interesting to me.
Yeah, no, totally. That surprises me for sure. Anshuman, did you have anything else like you wanted to show off or talk about as we're around the circle again?
Well, because I'm meeting Colin for the first time, and I finally got the name of his channel because, as I was saying before this live stream started, everyone says, "Oh, it used to be Loading the Cannon," but they never said what it is now. So I couldn't find it until just today. But I was looking through your channel, and you've already cost me money, Colin, because I didn't know that Andy Watson and Simon Gaines' Sunburn had been brought out, and I watched your video on that, and because I'm a fan of the 3 Andy Watson comics that I've read, but the first thing I'd read was Paris with Simon Gain. And also what I found out now, so this was from SLG, Slave Labor Graphics. And I had picked this comic up completely on a whim. I had no idea about it, but I think I saw the art in just the first couple of pages, and that drew me in, and it reminded me of an Indian artist, Mario Miranda, and it's very similar, the line work as well as the lettering, and that's what drew me to this. But then I think there's 4 issues of this comic, Paris, that was collected into a small trade paperback, and I actually started with the small trade paperback. Then I realized that it was shrunken down from the single issue form, so I hunted down the single issues, and it's set in 1920s Paris, and there's like an American beatnik girl, and then there's a British heiress who's also in Paris at the same time, and it's about the romantic relationship that they develop for each other through their mutual admiration of art and the bohemian life and things like that. But this comic was just it was it wasn't anything that we haven't seen before, but it was so warm and it was so well realized. The characters were so well sketched out. um and then there was art like this little
beautiful
bohemian apartment with the underwear dripping over there. It's just it's fantastic the way that this created the sense of time and place and characters. I mean, it's a simple little love story. Families and circumstances keep them apart, but in the end they end up together. Spoiler alert. But it was the execution that really got to me. So once I watched that video, I decided to dig this up and take another look at it again, and read it in the single issues. But also, what I found out when I went to look for Sunburn is that Paris has now been reprinted in a hardcover by Image Comics.
And it's a larger edition.
I know, it's larger.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I haven't bought that, but after reading Sunburn, I might go for that as well.
Yeah, it's Andy Watson is a good writer. Now for me, he's 4 out of 4 or 5 out of 5 of whatever I've read, and I'm going to hunt out more of his writing. But this combination of him and Simon Gain, Paris, is such a great comic, and the fact that the two of them have another comic that I didn't know about, which has just been published, it's a good thing I just got paid.
Yeah, on your best of the year videos, you had the book tour,
right,
which I thought was also one of the best. I always lose track of when things came out, so I wouldn't even.
Yeah, actually, book tour from I think a couple of years ago. I think.
But I bought that sort of on a whim just because I liked it. I liked the look of it in the store and bought it, and I thought it was a fantastic book.
Yeah.
And, so I was heartened to see you talk about it, since maybe your viewership is wide enough to get a few more people to go buy it. I felt like nobody talked about it when it came out. It's just so these books just go into the void,
Yeah.
At the same time, there were at least 3 commenters who said, I love the book tour. So I was just like, all right, here we go. Here I thought I was going to be like, let me bring you the word of, this comic that you haven't heard of. But look, Analog, he read it last week. I thought it was, and I think sometimes what happens is, and I'm guilty of it too, is that sometimes the big serious books, they take attention for being big or serious, or you go in the absolute opposite direction where you're like, no, I like something that is just pure pulp or something that's pure, genre exploitation, and the third way would be you completely focus on the art and the artwork. So it's not really about the whole, people keep saying art in story, and I always think about art in writing, making stories. So I tend to lean towards the narrative myself. More abstract, more surreal, those things, I can appreciate them intellectually, but they don't always get to me. But the book tour is my, like current example of a book that is a fantastic piece of literature, but because it seems light and because it seems inconsequential in comparison to other things, I think people don't give it the credit that it's due. Whereas it's really difficult to write a book that is that funny and that cringy and that it has that sort of deliberate pacing that it does, which is why I think Andy Watson is a really great writer. Even with Paris, it's like
Mhm.
it's something that I know what it's supposed to be. It's a love story, period piece, two women, but when you read it, it's about these individual characters, and that's, I think, the hardest thing for writers to do is to make like specific individual characters who seem like they're behaving of their own volition, not because a writer wants them to behave that way. So
Mhm.
that's what has really impressed me with all his comics so far, actually.
Nice.
Jared is talking Breakfast Afternoon as one that he really enjoyed as well too.
I haven't read it.
Making a
Honestly,
note
the
of it
book
right now.
tour was the first time I took Andy Watson seriously at all. So I've collected a few of his books, but I haven't really delved into them. So yeah, there's a case of writing someone off for probably looked at something 20 years ago,
Yeah.
didn't appeal to me, and then read one book, and now I'm like, okay, now I need to check this guy out. So he's on my list. And Sunburn is a very enjoyable book, and largely the writing is good. It's very subtle, but the artwork by Simon Gain is the real draw. That is,
Hmm.
it's a beautiful book.
Mm-hmm. Jared saying found the book tour a little too literal. And then AFPC, also a fan of Breakfast Afternoon. Love stories. He loves stories that deal with the reality of employment and job precarity. It's interesting what you said, Anshuman, about like that blend of the art and the narration, making like this good story. That's something that it just feels like there's so many different ways, especially with comics. I tend to go towards like the art being kind of the star for me. And if there's some sort of surreal story, if there's some sort of half attempt at a story around it, I'm already invested. But when that blend happens, man, it's something that's just incredible. When you pair an amazing visual artist with this incredible writer, that kind of synergy together is just mind-boggling. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Little Star and Breakfast Afternoon are worth reading, is what AFPC says.
Yeah, I'll have to look up Breakfast Afternoon. But no, I completely agree with you. And of course, it's comics. So I
Yeah,
think it would be foolish to say that, art doesn't matter or doesn't have any. The
Mm-hmm.
first
right.
thing you do when you flip through that is that. But I think what I mean is that and you can have an art book, you can have a collection of photographs, you can have paintings. There's lots of different ways of appreciating art. I think just personally, I've always attached myself to storytelling and narrative. And I think when I think some of the conversations that I have around the YouTube comments and people who send me messages, etc. So Kate Beaton's Ducks, which is a thing that a lot of people were talking about, a lot of people have said, I don't like the art style, or I don't like her drawing and things like that, which I think is completely fair for anyone to be able to say, I don't like that.
Sure.
It's allowed, but I don't really understand what that's based on, other than a simple dismissal of, I don't want faces to be square. But that
Right,
seems
right.
like an awfully huge rule to have, or something like that. I mean, when I was feeling a little nasty once because I was in a conversation with someone talking about how bad art just doesn't, just ruins everything for them. And I was trying to get them to explain to me what they meant by bad art. Do you mean fidelity to proportions? Do you mean anatomical? What do you mean? If you show a person flying, should they look like they're really flying?
More
How do I know what a
lines.
person? Yeah, all lines or things like that. So, but I've looked at some very big name artists, and I don't like to like rag on people, but I for in that conversation I took like 3 pages or 4 pages from a very famous Batman comic, and I said, this is a great artist, right? And now here's the facial expression, any page, like what am I getting? And I showed him like panels from one of the Harker Vagrant comics by Kate Beaton, and I'm just like, I can understand the emotions, I can understand the expressions, and it's funny, and it's delivering the joke, and it's part of the punchline, and it's, to me, that's what I really mean. Like, I don't mean the writing is as good as equal to the art. I mean,
Right.
even if it's a silent comic, even if it's written somewhere, you've decided which panels you're putting where and what the size of them are and how many of them in a page and all of that stuff. That is also what I mean by writing. So I think when people are able to do that, that is what really stands out to me. That's what really appeals to me. And sometimes it's easy. I think another conversation we'd had was about Will Eisner. Is like sometimes people who make things look easy are not given the credit. The fact that I'm turning page after page and I've got every image in my mind, that's an incredible achievement. But I get to the end of the book and I'm like, oh, that was okay. Like, yeah, but you got to the end of the book. You didn't
Right.
stop. You didn't pause. That's,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and that most recently happened to me with the first 10 of Yummy Fur. Like, that storytelling and the art and the flow and the individual panels and everything just really impressed me in a way that I never really saw before, especially somebody at that time, almost like coming out of the gate at that
Right.
level was really just impressive of how the hell, what have you been drinking? What have you been tapped into that has gotten you this kind of just beautiful way of storytelling, right? Yeah. Again, even though the specific story itself maybe was still in that surreal realm, it's just the way that story was told and the flow and narration in that way was incredible.
Yeah. I mean, I have to go back to Ed the Happy Clown because I think
Yeah.
I read that when I was trying to read, and I read Louis Reel, and I really loved Louis Reel. And then I read Ed the Happy Clown, and I was like, what the heck is this? I mean, like,
Right.
this is not, I was not expecting this. So the whiplash of it, I think, created a sort of rejection that I think is inaccurate. So I
Mhm.
really need to revisit that because that's always there in the back of my mind is I guess I didn't get it or I was just expecting something completely different and it's been many years. So get back into that. But those are the kind of things, yeah, I'll have to think about how many things I may have rejected because the art didn't look good to me. Those are also things that I always think about when I was young, I didn't like to look at anything that was black and white.
Right.
Comics means it has to be color. And if
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
black and white, so who knows what treasures I have passed up because of prejudices like that.
Yeah, it's
I
also impressive with the one you were showing, that slave labor graphics. Again, one of those companies that pops up every once in a while, and it feels like some of those, they're always worth giving it a shot, even if you've never heard of it before. And slave labor is one of those companies for me that I think they're always worth looking into and picking them up when you see them in the bins. Um, there's styles that I don't necessarily respond to, but those artists have incredible skill storytelling, and I think that's a big thing you were touching on too. It often just becomes a question of the style just didn't appeal to you. It's not that it's bad art; it's just that it's not your taste or whatever. Yeah, and I think that was also going back. I think in that time period too, the black and whites were seen as like the indie and maybe the potentially intellectual comics, and the color was like that's what you were supposed to be into, the Marvel and DC, that sort of thing. Because in the '90s, that was, I remember that being a big part of the conversation, and there was a lot of people on both sides just shitting on the other side, like black and white is this, it sucks, and color is this, and it sucks, and there was really strong opinions about that back then, from what I remember.
Yeah, for me, it wasn't quite that same cultural thing. For me, it was
Right,
just a prejudice that came from cheapness. So you
right.
had black and white reprints of things like X-Men, etc.,
Yeah.
and that those were the cheap ones, and you wanted the nice American color ones, not the ones that were coming from other countries,
Uh-huh.
in black and white. And a lot of the stuff that you saw in newspapers was just black and white, and then you would suddenly see them in some other newspaper and they were in color. So it wasn't like because I didn't have any association with the indie scene and the Marvel DC scene. It was just like if it's black and white, that means it was cheaply made and therefore an inferior product to something in color. That was just the sort of idea that came from that. Completely inaccurate, of course.
Uh-huh.
I
Um,
think that's true though. I think that like self-publishing in comics, it it doesn't have the stigma that it does in book publishing.
mhm.
For years, anyone who self-published a novel was considered an amateur and nobody would look at it. In comics, it was sort of seen as, well, you either get into Marvel or DC or you don't. So no one really blamed Dave Sim for publishing his own comic, you know?
Right.
But I think that amongst mainstream fans, it is a leap to say, why do I want to read about this? You know, what's this sort of, why doesn't it have color? That looks cheap. It looks amateurish. And of course, that's, you know, pretty idiotic take, but you know, there are people who won't watch movies with subtitles in them. You know what I mean? So it's like, you know, there's all kinds of people cutting out whole portions of an art form just because of some silly rule they made up for themselves.
I briefly dated a woman many years ago. We sat down and watched a movie that was subtitled, and the first thing she said is, "Oh, we got to read through this movie." And in that moment, I knew it just wasn't gonna work out.
Yeah.
It's been nice knowing you. I just wanted to say hello, first of all, to Guido van der Zee, not a name I'm familiar with. If you don't like the art, but the story is great, that then the art will grow on you. The other way around, that's never happened to me. And that's an interesting thing to think about that I haven't given much thought, and nothing comes to mind. It seems on its face very true, that idea that the art can grow on you, but if the story isn't there, or, you know, just the reverse. I don't know if that's ever happened to me either.
Well, I mean, I think, again, just not to belabor the point, is like I haven't understood what good art is from the point of view of comics art, as in, you know, and even in fine art and all that stuff, photography, there are rules of composition and things like that, but people break rules or bend the rules all the time. The thing I don't understand is when people talk about things as if they're talking about, say, cinematography or aspect ratio of a movie. You know, it's like, just because David Lean looks like this, you can't do that and have that immediacy of that handheld or that grimy or that whatever, that's what I think is like when you have a limited art set, or when you don't have the same kind of style as somebody else, you can make a story that works around your art style and get the effects that other people cannot with their art styles. I think that's one of the reasons why I love comics so much, is that it adds that level of absolute individuality. I'm not saying that people don't get better at their art. I'm still not sure what someone means by good art and bad art in the way that I've heard them talk. I mean, I've seen people draw stick figure comics that are really good and are quite successful as well. Sure. So after a point of time, it's just like, no, if you do it well enough, anything works. I mean, it's a question of, are you combining the tools you have? Are you using them? That's the best I've gotten to right now, at least. So I can't dismiss anything, even if something looks ugly to me. It's looking ugly purposely, I think, for a reason. And am I going to, you know, give the story a chance or not? It's more like my idiosyncratic thing rather than any actual evaluation.
Right. Yeah, we could never be together, Jared.
I think everyone will agree that it's best to just understand the language and not have to read subtitles at all.
For sure, yeah.
So
of course.
from that point of view, I do understand why someone would not want to look at subtitles as a larger kind of thing. But if the point is I'm not going to watch a movie, or watch it with dubs, is that what you meant, Terrence? Is that I'll only watch it when it's dubbed in English?
This individual was more about the dubbed. I can't stand dubbed because I feel like there's still that intonation. Even if I can't understand the language, I'm still now losing the acting, the vocal, the delivery, the pauses, everything in it add to that. So if it's dubbed in English and you're trying to like match that English with the Japanese mouth moving and trying to sort of, it just loses something for me. I'd much rather, and I've done it so much now, I can glance up and down pretty damn quickly and read those subtitles that I don't personally feel like I'm missing anything in the movie itself. But that's just my experience with it. But dubbed, I cannot stand dubbed. It drives me nuts. I find that insulting to some degree, to be honest.
Yeah, I just went to saw an old Fellini film in a theater a few weeks ago, and I could not even imagine that being dubbed. I mean, how would you get people to do all of the yelling in Italian and just the the sing song cadences. I mean, there's just no way. And we know there's awful, horrific dubs going on. So, I mean, if it's the only way you can watch something, that's one thing. But
yeah, totally.
If you have a chance to watch something, you know, I guess, and things like anime probably wouldn't make as much of a difference. Obviously, you're hiring voice actors regardless, you know. But
I found that it still kind of makes a difference. There's something about the delivery with the you know, there's still this kind of stilted kind of delivery to some of it that just really like, forget about it. Yeah.
It can never be the same, and it doesn't even come close. And I've always been a big, you know, subtitle snob. It's just like, who listens to the dub, etc. But lately, I've just decided to become more of a devil's advocate with a couple of things when I've realized that in movies and TV shows, when they put the subtitles, for example, and they're translating for you from another language, they're putting on everything. They're putting on what's playing on the radio. They're putting on what's on the news. And now the movie's composition has something in the background. It's on the news. You're not really hearing it. You're listening to the dialogue. But when you look at the subtitles, they're on equal footing. And suddenly the weight of that newspaper now you know that has, you know, there's a subtlety and a nuance that has been done in that audiovisual medium that has now been sacrificed by textualizing it and giving it that sort of, you know, cementing it with that much weight. Now that radio song that was just gently ironic, it's become something that's hitting you over the head because you're reading it and there's nobody speaking. Whereas when you were just listening to that song and the camera was moving by him in the car, you know, you had a completely different mood. So there is something that the subtitles rob from, because that medium is not supposed to have text. As in it's an additional thing, and therefore it does change the balance.
Yeah, it becomes almost like, am I supposed to pay attention to this? This is clearly a driving narrative of the story.
Yeah,
I better pay attention
you have to listen to this. Yeah.
That newspaper headline, that's gotta mean something later on. You know, yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's essentially like an audio close-up where the film creators didn't actually put a close-up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In my country, everything is subtitled, and it's really weird for me that in dubbed movies, Rambo sounds the same as Harry Potter. Yeah.
Well, that's one busy actor.
And that's that Jared points on something too that has crossed my mind with, you know, when stuff kind of gets re-subtitled, where it's looked at again after a lot of time, and kind of sometimes that's exactly what I think. Like, you see the comparisons of the English dubbed and the subtitled, and you know, not knowing the language, is that really what they're saying? Is that, you know, I try to leave those thoughts behind though and just kind of get into the subtitles, but there's that aspect of it for sure. Is this the direct translation? Can what they're saying right then, can it be directly translated to English even at all? You know, is there something that I'm missing anyway? But yeah, if you go down those roads, then it's the TV's off, books are closed, comics are closed. I'm just sitting down in the basement, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the way it works with everyone for everything. You know, you're watching an American movie in India. It's like, did I understand the accent is one of the things. It's like, it's taken me years to be able to, you know, distinguish. But then again, it's like, you're not going to get all the references. You're not going to get all the things anyway. The idea is you just immerse yourself in like 15 of them, and by the 16th one, you're fluent. That's the way it goes.
Right. Colin, did you have anything else you wanted to talk about here?
Sure. Okay. So this is a new book. It's called The Extraordinary Part, Book 1, Orsay's Hands. It's by, I believe they're pronounced Repair and Mulot. They're a French duo that makes comics together. Great in papers here.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And this is another new Fantagraphics book that just came out. And I've read Repair and Mulot before. They had a book years ago called Barrel of Monkeys that was published by, well, I can't remember what the name of that little company was, but it was one guy, and it's Bill Kartakopoulos. You know, I'm mangling his name. It's a long Greek name. And he's a guy who's a comic critic, a guy who puts on comic programming. I see Rick Ray knows. Oh yeah, and the perineum technique, which is another Fantagraphics book. So this book is, they also wrote a book that Olivier Schraun, who I mentioned earlier, illustrated, called Portrait of a Drunk, I believe is what it's called. It's a fantastic book. But this book, it's big in color. As you can see, there's this, these things are like, basically they're these sort of organisms who've shown up on Earth, and they're all over the place. They call them wolves, and they're largely benign. Yes, thank you, Rick Ray, Rebus. And so these are just now part of people's lives. They've just sort of learned to live with them. And the story is basically this main character is a young guy named Orsay. I get the feeling he's maybe on the cusp of becoming an adult, not quite, still at home with his parents. His mom is sick. And he has an encounter with a wool that changes him. I don't want to give away too much, but the light sci-fi aspect of it really reminded me of Manuel Fior's work. I know Terrence has discussed before.
Yeah.
He infuses some of his books with, it'll be a normal world, but there will just be something slightly different to make it, a sci-fi element to make it slightly different. And then we'll see how that affects the world. But I was very much taken with this book, really enjoyed it. I'm glad that there's more coming, even though I wanted this to be the whole thing, but this larger format really shows off the art and the storytelling, which is fantastic. Really can't say enough about the quality of the writing and the cartooning. It was an engrossing read from start to finish. So, and as you can see, these wolves are all over the place, and when someone is hurt or inconvenienced by them, they're calling in police, and so now there's activists who want to defend the rights of the wolves. I don't want to show off too many spoilers, so I'm not going to show too much from the later part of the book. But anyway, just some fantastic art. That's
looks to be gigantic as well, too.
Yeah, it's probably maybe 12 by 14 or something like that.
Wow.
12 by 15. I mean, it's a big book. It's one of these books that probably didn't need to be this big, to be honest. There's nothing in it that requires that, but it's just so luxurious to have it in this size. But yeah, physically, just a really pleasurable reading experience. Here's for scale next to my head.
Yeah.
But a really pleasurable reading experience physically as well. Beautifully made, as you would expect from them. But also just a really, really fun story. It's been years since I've read Barrel of Monkeys. What's the book? I think it was Portrait of a Drunk, which is a tremendous, tremendous graphic novel. Just fantastic. Yeah. Rick Ray, as usual, Rick Ray is on point.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So highly recommend. Both you guys, I think, would love that book. It's fantastic. And they wrote, this duo wrote a couple of books that were illustrated by Bastien Vives that Fantagraphics also published, which were kind of about a girl heist team. And those were very fun. Enjoyed those quite a bit, but I really enjoyed this. And like I said, Terrence, I think you read that book by Fior. I can't remember which one you read.
Was it?
And you weren't. I don't think you were bowled over by it, right?
No, I wasn't, but I did enjoy it though. I'm blanking on the name too. I liked it. It was a Rasa. Rasa had read it first, and then I checked it out. And I enjoyed it. It didn't blow me away, but I didn't dislike it. I thought it was pretty damn good.
Yeah, I think they've published 5 of his books in English now, Fior, and 3 of them I think have those sort of slight sci-fi elements to them. I guess one of them, I think it's Celestia, is
Uh-huh.
really it's the world does not resemble our own, but there's a
Right.
couple of them where they're just taking place in France or wherever, and they just happen to have large spaceships or something floating around.
Uh-huh.
So it's just enough to alter the world, but there's still a lot of human drama and interaction going on. And I felt like I don't want to oversell this, like this is
Right.
Hamlet over here or something.
We're all about overselling stuff. Don't worry about it. Sell it.
But as far as an enjoyable read, it's a lot of fun, and you do get invested in the human part of the story pretty quickly. So anyway, a nice surprise. It was one I knew I was going to buy regardless, but I really, really enjoyed it. So
cool.
There you go.
Amazing. Yeah, that's amazing. Madly writing as you were talking. I was listening, but writing notes as usual for more library hunts. What should I I think I've talked about it before, but I just kind of wanted to briefly talk about, I finally picked up the last 2 issues of Pineapple Army that I needed. It's Naoki Awasawa on art, and then Kazuya Kudo writing. And it continued all the way to the last issue, 10 issues. It went from Viz back in 1989 is when it came out. And it continued all the way to the end of just really incredible little stories about this ex-military guy who gets into training people. So he doesn't come in and save the day. He deals with people who are in some sort of conflict situation, and he trains them to fight for themselves. He always ends up getting involved to some degree, but his intention is to kind of help these average everyday people. And every single issue is its own kind of self-contained little story. And he'll meet people from his past, from his military past within them sometimes. And then through the storytelling, you get a sense of who he was, his time spent in Vietnam, and things that have happened to him along the way. Really enjoyable, really, really easy to read. It's fantastic to see Urasawa's earlier art. I don't know the timeline of his art super, super well. But like I said, earlier on in his career anyway, not his first work by any stretch, though. And again, the beauty of going back to these Viz titles, discovering some of the stuff that was being put out over here. But highly, if you can see this, I don't know if it's been collected. I think the Viz stuff did pretty good. I think the Viz books that they put out, I think they did a pretty good job of collecting them as well. But hopefully they're fairly easy to dig up. But not much else to say about it that I haven't said in previous videos. But I just really, really love this stuff. So glad to find these last couple. The only thing with this one issue, it's this snow theme. This is the only issue it kind of deals with this. There's this serial killer who turns out not to be totally kind of like the 80s slasher movie serial killer. There's a little bit more history to him. This is the only issue where the every single page is kind of this cream color, which is very strange. It doesn't look like it's faded. It looks like just the paper quality for this one issue is dramatically different from the rest of it. James D. Hudnall is working on it, I think, when it comes to translation. Not seeing the credit, but he has a write-up in the back of this one, just this one issue where he talks a little bit about his experience with this book and his time in the military too. And then the covers I talked about in the video yesterday too. I love these covers a lot. They're really surprisingly one of those books when I first saw it in the bins, opening it up, really taken aback from the cover to the inside, which is something that, we're all used to some degree, but this one seems to be dramatically different, but really beautiful work here on the covers. So yeah.
Terrence, who did the covers?
This guy named Darren Ching is his name, Ching. And when I looked for him online last night, I found a Darren Ching who was an artist, but it didn't say in kind of his bio that he ever worked in comics. So I don't know if it's the same guy. Even on Comic Vine, there was no, usually Comic Vine is pretty good with kind of having these entries. They list the cover design as Urasawa as well. So unfortunately, they didn't have a link to this Darren Ching. So I'm not sure what else he's done in comics.
Interesting.
Crack's description of the comic into a theme song. Yes. So yeah, really, really great. Loved it. Anything else that you have for us, Anshuman? Oh, I think you're muted.
You're quiet.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
There you go.
Now, I didn't expect to last this long, so I'm just like,
Right.
Do I have a
Yeah.
Well, actually, I had sort of a question for all my American, North American friends over here, where I have read this comic called Soft Boy. Now, what can you tell me about this? Because I want to get, I want to know who will say what about this, because I kind of did a little bit of research, but this is more like, what's your take on this? That's what I want to know. Do you know this?
I'll have to totally
Terrence?
pass it on to Colin. I know the
Okay.
character. I've never read a single comic of Soft Boy.
Yeah.
The bartender is telling me to leave. Apparently,
Right.
It's last call.
Last
the
call.
other way around.
Order a shot of tequila, quick.
So Soft Boy is by Archer Pruitt, who I believe makes his living as a musician, not as a cartoonist, though he's clearly a very good cartoonist. I think those are they published by Drawn and Quarterly? Is that who published that? Anshuman?
Yes, they are. D&Q. Yep.
So I think there's at least 2 issues, maybe 3.
I have 3 issues.
Okay, and that's it. That's it.
Yeah, that's all I've been ever able to find.
Yeah, and he's, like I said, I think he just makes his living elsewhere. So he may have done some other little stuff here and there. I don't know if anybody in the chat would, AFPC or Rick Ray or these guys would know where else he might have popped up in anthologies or something. But Soft Boy was one of those things that people were clamoring for more of in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I think at this point, they just sort of forgotten it, like it's just been so long that, and I don't think they're very easy to find anymore. I mean, I can't imagine, like I said, as with most of this stuff. Oh yeah. Duplex Planet. So yeah. That makes sense because a lot of people went through there. I don't have a run of Duplex Planet, unfortunately. Yeah, I think that he's a guy people really wanted more work from, but I don't, it's not something he needed to do, and maybe he just didn't really want to be bothered anymore. But I don't want to speak for him. I have no idea. But I'm sure he would have been published had he wanted to do more. He's kind of, to me, he's kind of a lot like Mazzucchelli was. Before Asterios Polyp came out, everybody wanted more Mazzucchelli and couldn't get anything. And Mazzucchelli was just living his life somewhere else doing something. And then all of a sudden he shows up with this big graphic novel. But we still don't have all the Mazzucchelli stuff collected from his post-Marvel work up to Asterios Polyp. There's a whole book's worth of stuff. So, yeah, there you go. Rasa's on it. So, yeah, so good for you that you got those, because it's this certain thing you just sort of, I bought them back when you could just buy them for cover price. They were just probably still sitting on the shelf from when they were ordered, but I know I am ashamed. I wish I had. I'll get to work on it.
I don't know what happened to my other light over here, but I'm going to use one of my emergency lights over here, because this is I think I saw one of these in an anthology, one of these short stories. This is the story. Sorry about the light again, but that's the one-page story, and they're all stories kind of like this.
Yeah.
Right.
And some of them are quite unsettling in a very like it's this interesting, obviously a kind of simple thing of like where you've got this cheery Pollyanna type of character in these extremely, destitute circumstances and living with the rats and pigeons and flies and things like that. And these are all his friends. So it's kind of like this weird Disney character Cinderella take in the world of, I don't know, Smacks or something like that. But it is quite unusual, and it's very interesting. And I got these 3 comics, and then I couldn't find anything about. I mean, I guess there's just no more comics of this type. And I'm not sure. Maybe Colin, you will know, or someone in the comments will know. Maybe it was in an anthology like The Best American or that McSweeney's number, whatever it was. I think it was in one of those, because I got these singles immediately after I saw it in that, and they're all very strange. And I think in some ways, I think in some ways it's okay that there aren't more than 3 issues, because how much more of the same thing could you take? I think it's almost perfectly. And I think the other 2 issues are like they got smaller and smaller as they went along. So
Right.
like this one was like a regular comic size. No, actually it's not, now that I think about it. But yeah,
John and Quarterly
they-
went through a phase where they made lots of smaller comics, though.
Yeah.
They had Dylan Horrocks had a series called Atlas that only lasted a couple issues, but that was also printed at that size, that sort of 2/3 size.
But Atlas was also in those Coco Nino press kind of issues, weren't they? All right, there. I just had a bright
Good
idea. There you go. Yeah, because I think, or maybe I'm confusing it with another Dylan Horrocks thing, because it was like Delphine, those large, but it was called something else. It was called something other than Atlas. But I'm confused. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, not at all. I was trying to offer some sort of context for why they were smaller. And that might have just been at the time they thought this would be different, and I'm sure it backfired, because they were probably too short for the shelves and comic shops.
Lost. Yeah.
And
But,
issue 3 is smaller than the others.
There you go.
Like it's weird that but anyway, it was an interesting series. It was because of its tone and because of its thing. But I was just wondering if and that's it. Like, I guess he's got other things, better things to do than make more of these comics or something.
Right.
Or maybe this was all he wanted to do, because it certainly seems like there's a gag and there's a kind of interesting effect that he's getting out of it, and it's kind of like a British TV show that's all you get, and that's the joke.
And there's also the possibility that we're wondering where this guy is. I'm sure he's living his life, but and then 2 years from now, he pops up with a 300-page graphic novel.
Well, yeah, Asterios Pollitt. Yeah.
That does happen. There's been multiple cartoonists where I've wondered, whatever happened? Mary Fleener, who's one of my favorites, and a few years ago, she just popped up with this whole graphic novel out of whole cloth. And Rick Altergott, have you guys read Rick Altergott? Terrence, do you know Doofus?
No. I know it, but yeah.
That's an old alternative comic from the 90s. And I was saying to somebody, whatever happened to this guy? He's like, he's got a full graphic novel coming. Right. He's just very slow. He's been working on it for 20 years. Wow. So you never know what these people are doing while they're living lives and raising families. And, but yeah, Ang Shuan, you might be right. He might have just thought, well, did what I had to do with that little puffy doll. And I had him run over and bitten and torn up. And that was all I could really think of. So
yeah,
good cartoonist though.
Yeah, my wife picked up one of these issues once, and she was like, I don't like it. It's too creepy. And I'm like, but this, like, he's just talking to a rat. There's no gore. There's nothing. She's like, no, it makes me feel icky. Yeah.
Right. Hello, Paulo Costa. Yes, correct.
I'm to blame.
Colin.
Let's see. So, Terrence, you might be aware of this because you read Ryan Carey's work. So this is The Glass Chamber.
Yeah.
By, I'm not sure. Tia R. Zach. It's hard to tell with the lettering. Anyway, I read about this Ryan Carey's. Well, it's his Patreon, but it also functions as his blog. I believe it's free. The regular posts are free, and then he just provides extra content for the people who pay. Four Color Apocalypse is his online name, and he wrote about this, and I was really impressed with some of the images, so I ordered it. And it's just a very slight little, very thin little thing, but I thought the art was lovely.
Yeah.
And there's in even though this thing is very short, there's several little stories in here. But this is someone who I had never heard of, didn't know anything about them. I thought the cartooning was really fantastic. And so this is a name that's on my list now. Someone I want to see what else they do.
That one there was a cover of Reptile House.
That's right.
And that story appeared in Reptile House there.
That's right. And I have not read any of the Reptile House anthologies, though I know that you're all over them.
They're great, yeah. And that's thanks to guys like Chaos and Comics as well too. Was raving about that early on.
So anyway, just kind of giving you a look at the whole
Beautiful.
thing. But yeah, she can really, really draw. And this thing's nicely printed, nicely presented. She's online. She's I'm saying she. I don't actually know if she's a she or not. So, but at Dream My Guts with 2 S's is who they are on Instagram. So, yeah, if that appeals to y'all, maybe check it out. Like I said, and this says the Glass Chamber 0, so I don't know if there's more coming or not. But a lot of these little publications like this, you order them and then you feel like, come on, I paid $10 and it took me 20 seconds. This is one where I didn't have that feeling though, because I really did feel like this could be someone I'm reading 20 years from now.
Yeah.
I really felt like, oh, there's a lot of talent here, and I want to see where it goes. So anyway,
and kind of really interesting storytelling from that like body horror type of area. And again, It feels like a creator that is kind of, again, starting out of the gate at a pretty strong level. It's beautifully produced. Like the paper even itself is really nice. Like everything about that little zine is beautiful. I had ordered it. I think it came in the mail the day before Ryan had written about it on his blog. So the rare time that I was half a step ahead of Ryan.
You're on it. Yeah.
He's light years ahead of us because he's got such he's so entrenched in that world, which is why it's so fantastic to read his stuff. But I really loved it. It was one of the highlights of recent reads because, like you said, it feels like this is a creator that will just kind of ramp up from here, and hopefully with some longer works as well too in the works.
Yes.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Sorry, did you mention that the story he was showing was collected in an anthology or a volume somewhere?
The second story in there was from this anthology called Reptile House, which I think has like 10 or 11 issues out at this point, something like that, from Philadelphia, and it's really strong stuff. I've got I think the first 8 or 9 of them, and they're really, really fun. It does feel like this modern kind of underground indie punk kind of zine, but with some incredible artists doing some stuff and giving these people a voice to just get their feet wet. It's what you start feeling like. One was called it had its own little collection from the early issues, this kind of this metal band and the ups and downs of this this band dynamics and stuff. But Goat Horn, I think is what it was called. And then Reptile House did a separate collection of that too. So if you go to I think it's reptilehouse.com possibly, you should find some of that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Philadelphia is becoming kind of a hotbed for comics. I've never been to Philadelphia, so I don't have any firsthand knowledge, but they've got Reptile House is there. Nate Garcia lives there. Josh Pettinger just moved there.
Right.
And they have a store there called Partners and Sons, which has gotten a huge reputation very quickly. So
Yeah.
um,
Isn't Copacetic Comics from around there too?
They're Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh. Okay.
Yeah. I'm going to try to go to Pittsburgh this year, but I don't know that I'll make it to Philadelphia. So
right.
They're far away, even though they're in the same state.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that's cool. Very nice. Where did you order that one from?
Me?
Yeah, directly
from Reptile House.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And I didn't order anything else. Just, how it is.
Just
sometimes you look and go, well, I don't have all these other issues, and that's probably the wrong way to approach it. I should probably just jump in on Reptile House because I'm never going to get the early issues now. It's impossible, probably. So, but there's so much to try to keep up with that you pick your battles.
Yeah. When I was first thinking of trying to do this distribution thing, I got in touch with them. I think I got 5 copies of each of the first 5 or 6. They're all gone now. Thankfully, they all did eventually sell. Yeah. So they're open to those kind of things as well, too. These kind of mass orders, and you get a bit of a discount, even just for trying to distribute stuff. So, but I think at this point they've kind of even grown past that. They seem to have a pretty far reach. I know that Domino Books carries Reptile House issues as well, too. So. I don't have much else really because I don't have too much positive to say about it. Just touching on Thriller though, started off really strong and then dramatically just dropped off the face of the planet for me.
Very, very true.
The Trevor Von Eden art was the big draw for this. And I do love it. And I found that, sorry, let me do this here. The first, I don't know if it was the first 4 issues or 5 issues. Trevor is working with an artist, a colorist, whose name I'm looking for here. That I think that they worked beautifully together. Ziuko, Ziuko. I'll find in one of the other books the first name. Gorgeous.
Tom, I think.
Gorgeous work. Sorry, what's that?
I think it's Tom. Zuko.
Tom. There you go. Gorgeous work. And there's times that I don't know what the communication was like with them, but it started off so strong, but then the coloring kind of dropped off. I felt it didn't have that kind of vibrancy of the first, I think it was 4 issues, really did it for me in a huge way. I mean, I'm not finished reading the series yet. I think it went 12. I think I've only read the first 7 at this point. So I still have a bit of a ways to go. But I find I'm really in a dead spot right now. That was a bit of a challenge to read. But beautiful stuff. And one of the issues that impressed me the most, and one of the panels that actually blew me away the most, was in issue number 2 here. We get some of our main characters reliving their past. And there's a fire that kind of destroys this one family's life, kills the sister. And this here, I found myself staring at this back leg for a inordinate amount of time. I just love that block of green and the minimal lines on it. This entire panel, I think, works beautifully, but it's this kind of odd use of coloring that I think just is absolutely gorgeous. Really gorgeous. Oh, finishes strong with Alex Nino. Well, there you go. So, and it's the later issues that I'm missing. So that's very promising.
AFPC saying this makes me want to reread Thriller. I haven't read it in many years, but it's not the art that gets terrible. It's the fact that Robert Lauren Fleming isn't on the book, and a different writer finishes the series is my problem with it. But maybe I should reread it as an adult and see.
And some of this stuff is really gorgeous. There's just this nice loose quality to it that really appeals to me. And the page layouts, so much fun. Stuff like this, just phenomenal to read through. Very enjoyable, even for a DC book. Where's Damien? I still really dug it. I just found that there was a couple of issues that just fell a little short, and I think that's when It's number 4. It might have been issue 5. This Kane Creole character comes in. So we get that kind of coloring, and then we bring on, let me just find a good page here for us. We bring on the amazing Lynn Varley, and it just kind of loses something that's, it seems a little more kind of formed. It seems a little more kind of put together. Not necessarily always a bad thing. I just really responded to the looseness of the coloring and the art in the last one. And this Kane Creole sort of Elvis type character just does nothing for me. So I found these 2 issues, 5 and 6, just kind of lost me a little bit. There was moments in number 6 that I found interesting. Again, like as you're starting to get through the characters and as you're starting to learn more of their history, is great. But the energy from the art in these 2 issues just isn't there for me. This Tom comes back for the next issue to color. And even when he comes back, it's not kind of at the level that it was for those early issues. The kind of chaotic nature is kind of gone. It almost feels like I wonder if somebody reined him in a little bit, or I don't know the dynamics of why he even took an issue off. I haven't kind of read into it at all, but I just look at the pictures. Yeah, which is nothing wrong with that. I do that a lot with some of this stuff too. But this one, that even the pictures weren't really doing it for me, because that kind of looseness was lost and it started tightening up a little bit. I want the chaotic. I want the looseness, right? So beautiful stuff. Otherwise, I mean, Von Eden, I don't know a lot about, but the couple of times I've come in contact with his work, really, really like it. Beautiful, a very odd style. And it just surprises me that he had this career at DC, where he did some work on, Batman and Superman. It surprises me at that age or that era. What year are we looking at here?
83.
Yeah, 1983. Yeah. So maybe it
was an early attempt of DC. That was when they were, Camelot 3000.
Right.
They were trying to. It was printed on nicer paper. And they were trying to do things that were breaking out a little bit. And I think Thriller was a pretty big failure. And I think that's why maybe the creative team changed so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
They were trying to salvage it. But I agree. Those early issues are really exciting. And I pulled them out of quarter bins when I was a kid and didn't know what the hell was going on. But yeah, it's it's hard to call it a lost classic because it doesn't really amount to much of anything. But
right.
It's a sort of thing that I wonder if it would find an audience in a book. I kind of doubt it, but at least then we would all be able to look at it nicely printed.
Right.
But the issues are really nice. They're really nice looking comics. So.
Oh yeah, yeah. So the Batman and the Outsiders, yeah, I've seen a couple of those. I haven't dug into that yet. That's the kind of thing that I might keep my eyes out for. I'm sure those have been collected in a trade that at this point I can probably find for $2.25. Maybe I'll kind of dip into it that way. And then AFPC is also saying Black Lightning as well, which I wasn't familiar with, so I'll have a look for that. Yeah, it's amazing the chances some of these companies took. I'm just a little more surprised with DC. It feels like Marvel, in my limited knowledge, has a little bit more of a history of kind of traveling outside that box.
No, Terrence, that's 100% not true.
Yeah.
That's
what I'm starting to understand.
Marvel got desperate, when bankruptcy came around. So you had things like Marvel Max and some of those things. But all through the 80s, DC was second. So they had nothing to lose, which is why they're bringing over the Brits, why they, had these nice looking comics. I mean, things like Camelot 3000, which isn't a great comic, but it looks fantastic.
Right.
Ronin was something. They were Dark Knight Returns. They were really experimenting with formats and letting these guys run wild, because any hit they got, they could use. There was a point where I think every Marvel title outsold everything at DC except for Legion of Superheroes and Teen Titans.
Right.
And they would not have been bestsellers for Marvel, So DC in the Paul Levitz, Dick Giordano, Jeanette Kahn era, they were willing to do all kinds of crazy shit, and that really lasted up until the 2000s. And they were trying to push. I mean, I don't want to oversell it like, they were Fantagraphics or something. They weren't.
Right.
But I mean, something like Vertigo was a big swing, and you would have never seen Marvel do something like that. They just weren't committed to things they couldn't turn into Underoos and Serial,
Right.
Whereas DC thought, oh, well, Swamp Thing or Hellblazer, we can keep those in print. Books like Preacher and Why the Last Man, like those made sense for them, but they had to be patient. Marvel would not have been patient enough. They would have canceled those titles at issue 5 and moved on. I think Warren Ellis once said in an interview, the difference between Marvel and DC was that when DC called to tell you were canceled, they would say, okay, well, you got until issue 12, wrap everything up, whatever else. And he'd go, okay. And Marvel would call and he'd go, well, how long do I have? And they said, that was it. You're already done. You don't get to even write an ending. It's already, the issue you wrote is already the last issue. So,
and I think you touched on it, like where my mind always goes is obviously with the Vertigo stuff. I guess when I think of it, I mean like DC proper, but you've mentioned some names that are 100% DC proper, because I always think of Vertigo as, of course it's DC, but it's when they realized they wanted to carve out that niche. So it surprises me that kind of like DC proper is kind of taking these chances. But yeah, you've thrown out some titles that I've seen in the bins for sure.
Yeah, and all those Vertigo books were, when they started, the 6 Vertigo titles were all DC titles,
Right, and then
Sandman, Shade the Changing Man, Doom Patrol. Those were comics I'd pick up as a young person, and I didn't know what the hell was going on in Animal Man or Doom Patrol. Like, it was completely alien to me. So they were putting those things out on newsstands, on spinner racks,
Yeah.
I don't know who was buying them there, but
yeah. Some parents who just take the comic, give them the comic, give them this comic.
Give them
shut them up, chalk a bar in a comic. Yes, you can have it. So yeah, a nice surprise. But knowing that Alex Nino kind of finishes off the run, I'll stick with it for sure, because those 2 issues I packed it in pretty damn quick. But I'll kind of keep my eyes out for the last few issues that I need for that run. Anything else that you wanted to discuss there, gentlemen? Anything else you wanted to show?
This has been great, but I'm going to unfortunately have to bow out at this point of time, just because I've got to work tomorrow. If it was Saturday night, this would be the most rocking Saturday night I've had in a while.
Well, I mean, maybe if you got nothing else either, Colin, maybe we'll call it a day here at the 2-hour mark. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for hanging out. I really appreciate it. It was nice to see you both.
It was fantastic, and I do want to say that I want to be invited back, please, because this is like a little bit of a college seminar, and I'm just sitting over here taking notes. I've got like 15 Amazon, tabs open and all of that stuff.
Right.
This is just absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, for sure. It was a pleasure to have you, and of course, we have to give a shout out to the amazing chat. 26 people. That's like epic numbers for me here. 25 watching live. Thank you very much, as always, for commenting and questions and filling in the gaps for us. Like, it really, we really appreciate it. It's fantastic. Stick around for 1 sec, though, fellas, while I hit end to have our final goodbye. Thank you very much, everybody.
See you, everyone.
We'll see you next week.
Have a good day.